Hi everyone. So you have probably heard about the many problems people have when descaling these machines. It's been a huge problem over the years and has resulted in countless calls to Breville and often results in very expensive repairs. It affects all the dual boiler models, but in this video I'm going to concentrate on the Oracle Touch. This is actually the easiest machine to work with due to the touchscreen menus, as you get more visibility into what's going on under the hood. This will be a less technical and more condensed version of another video I did, but it's going to cover some checks you can do to make sure the sensors in your machine are working okay, or enough at least that the descale process is going to complete without failing. The other part of this puzzle is what product you're going to use, as some can cause it to fail more than others. I'm going to do a video comparing different solutions in the future, but for now I recommend using Breville's own descale solution, and make sure you do not put in more than it says to. Beware though, if your machine fails badly on this test, then there is a chance you may need to open up the lid and remove a couple of parts to get it working again. So only go through this procedure if you are comfortable doing that. I take no responsibility if you break your machine. This is for informational purposes only, and it's up to you to decide if you are comfortable carrying it out. Also, do not try and do this test on another version of machines such as the dual boiler or the non-touch Oracle, as they require a different process and you might risk damaging them. I will release separate videos on these in the near future. And for those of you here that have been through a descale and you now have a broken machine, I will cover some things you can try to bring it back to life at the end of the video. Okay, so let's start with a basic overview of what happens during a descale and look at how and why it can go wrong. Inside your machine you have a steam boiler. The boiler has 3 metal probes inside which keep track of how full the water level is. This is so the machine can decide when to ask for more water and when to turn on or off the heat. The high red probe controls the steam pump and the low blue one controls the heat. They work by sending an electrical signal through the water, but if they're not working properly then this signal can be wrong, which in turn can cause a couple of different problems. Firstly, it could cause the boiler not to fill, the heater will stay off and the boiler will stay empty, and you'll be stuck because you can't have heat until you have water. Or you could end up with a much worse problem. You have little or no water in there, but the heater does come on. If this happens, you are usually in a lot more trouble and it often ends up with a lengthy repair or even a whole new boiler. So now you understand the important role the probes play, we need to make sure these are working extremely well before we run through a descale. As once you add descale solution into the boiler, the risk of these probes sending the wrong signals can easily double. This is because descale solution is very conductive. So what we need to do is to ensure the probes are only measuring water and don't get confused when either steam or descale solution is on them. To avoid this, they need to be in tip-top condition. This particular machine is very handy as it has a debug mode where you can see exactly how the probes are performing. Let's take a look. To enter the debug menu, first switch the machine off at the wall, then hold the power button on the machine while switching the plug on. Keep holding until you see the menu load and the password screen appears. Enter 5 zeros and then choose debug menu and scroll along to the Steam debug page. Here you will see several things such as the temperature of the boiler at the top, then the boiler heater status, and then what we'll be focusing most on, and that's the AD count of the high and low probes. The high probe turns on the water pump and the low probe turns on the heater. This AD number resembles a resistance measurement through the water. Basically, if the number is below 1880, that means it is submerged underwater. And then if it's up around 2800, water hasn't reached the probe yet. So the 1880 point is the important part here. If the probe gets a little wet from steam or descale solution, a good probe will ignore it, and you'll see the number stay above 2300 or so. But if the probe is in bad condition, you'll get a much lower number, and if that number is below 1880, that's when bad things happen. So in order to check to see what level your machine registers with and without water, we're going to drain some out and keep watch on that number to see how much it drops. Wait until the steam boiler has reached full temperature before doing this. Then lay down a towel across the grill so you don't burn yourself on the steam. Using a flat blade screwdriver, remove the descale drain cover and slowly turn the right side one anti-clockwise until you start to see the steam coming out. You should see the boiler status on the screen change to off. First, we are going to make sure your steam pump is working okay. So empty the boiler for 5 seconds and then close the drain screw. You should hear your pump come on to refill the lost water. If this completes within 5 to 10 seconds, then your pump is working okay and you can continue. What I'm trying to avoid here is anyone draining their boiler and not being able to refill it again after this test. After this, repeat the steps again by draining the water for 5 seconds and you should see the high probe number shoot up. Ideally as near to 2800 as possible. If the number is below 2300, then stop the test here. Your machine will very likely fail once you add solution into the boiler. If the readings are okay, then continue draining the boiler until the same happens to the lower probe count. Again, if you get a lower than 2300 reading on the lower probe, then stop draining immediately. Turn the drain screw in and the boiler should heat up and refill again. You failed the test, so looking to getting a new set of probes installed. So if this has all gone well for you, you will now have the readings from both probes. This is where it gets a bit fuzzy, as depending on where your numbers are, along with what kind of descale product you use, and then there's what dosage of product you use too. These all affect how much these numbers will be affected during the actual descale cycle. I've done some testing with Breville's own descale solution, made according to their dosage, and I found it to be much safer to use than pure citric acid, for example. I'm going to do another video on those products in the future, but for now I'd recommend only using Breville's own one. I've tested a few different probes on mine and I found generally that the AD count would decrease by about 500 if you add descale solution. So if you remember that danger zone is just below 2000, then you are really looking for readings of around 2500 to be fairly sure. I know that leaves a very small safe window of about 300, but for some reason Breville sets such a high threshold on these machines, which increases the failure rate actually. On the other models you'll have a lot more flexibility as the threshold is much lower. Why Breville made the Touch so prone to failures, I don't know. So with that, you should have the information you need to go ahead and make up your own mind about running a descale. If your readings were borderline or completely failed, then I suggest getting a brand new set of probes installed. Here's an example of one that failed on me. I'm now going to let some steam out for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And close the valve. You can see here it's only got to 1400, so the pump is not going to come on and fill it back up. Now let's move on to some things you can do if your machine is stuck, whether that was from a failed descale or from doing this test. Start at the beginning where I showed you how to enter the debug mode. This will give you a quick indication of which probe is not working. If you see the high probe hovering somewhere between 300 and 1880, then there's a fair chance the probe is faulty or it's become contaminated with descale solution. If the latter, you can sometimes rinse the solution off while it's still in the machine. To do this, remove the water tank and any other loose items, then tilt the machine forwards about 45 degrees. If you're strong enough, then a bit of a shake might improve your chances. This only works obviously if you've got clean water in your boiler though. If this doesn't work, and there might not be enough water in the boiler to swoosh around, then you're going to need to take the lid off and clean the probes manually. If the low probe is affected, or both probes even, then there is a chance your boiler could have blown the thermal fuse. You can try cleaning up the probes, but your chances of success are much slimmer and you will likely need to get the boiler repaired. Okay, so to open up the machine to clean the probes, remove the 2 screws underneath the front panel and then the 2 torque screws at the back. Lift up the lid and use a screwdriver to hold up the lid while we carry out the repair. Before we go much further, make sure your machine has cooled down for at least 15-20 minutes, otherwise you might risk burning yourself on the steam. You can see on top of the steam boiler some red and blue wires. The red wire goes to the high probe and the blue to the low. Use some pliers to take off the connector and then remove the clip like so. The probe should now pull out. Rinse it in some fresh water and then replace it. A tip to get these back in easily is to move the O-ring halfway down the ceramic shaft. This should then push back in nicely. Once you've cleaned the appropriate probe, replace the connector and clip and switch on the machine. Hopefully this will get you back up and running. If not, then like I said earlier, you may need to get the boiler repaired. So if this video has helped you out, please leave a like and comment below to let me know. Thanks for watching.